Cześć and hello. Cześć is in Polish, of course. Hello, my name is Greg. I'm here I have a pleasure to meet you and be a master of ceremony for that meetup, small ceremony. So I'd like to, welcome you, everybody here on site, here in our building in Warsaw, Poland, but also meet and greet your online viewers. First of all, I would like to start by telling a few words about Angular.love. It's a community for those of you who didn't hear about it. It's a online community about Angular. We are really focused on the blog, but not only. We organize meetups. We do have some speeches available online, also some other type of content available also online, like short movies and some other updates that we share on the social media. We, of course, partner a lot of conferences. We are involved in other initiatives, but we are really open. So if you would like to talk with us, be present here as a speaker, feel free to contact us on our website, Angular.love. I would like to also tell a few words about our sponsor, House of Angular, because I'm also representing House of Angular as a CTO in that company. We are Angular experts. For a few years, we built a really great team. So we feel like we've done a lot of different projects. We are also involved in consulting and some other auditing Angular projects and so on. We've seen a lot of them and we work with a lot of them. So we have experience to, consult and develop Angular projects. Today we're gonna have two talks. First off, there will be Konrad Wróblewski. He will talk about content projection, so ng content and things like that. And then we'll have a short break, and then we'll have a speech from Maciej Wójcik from Cisco, and he will talk a bit more about ngOnInit in reactive components, why you don't need to use it. I also encourage you to subscribe us on Facebook, on Twitter, on any other social media like YouTube, because the speeches will be provided there, not only from today, but the future ones and so on. We'll also have a small survey at the end, just to gather the information from you and be able to deliver you even more quality talks in the future. So I think that's pretty much it. So now I will invite to the scene Konrad Wróblewski from House of Angular. He will talk a bit about content projection. Hello, Konrad, and please welcome Konrad with some applause. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Greg, for the invitation. As he already said, my name is Konrad Wróblewski, and today I'm gonna say a few words about the content projection. It will be like the introduction from the easiest part to some more advanced. And yeah, so let me take you on the journey into component dev. Okay, but firstly, some words about myself. I am Angular developer in House of Angular. It's for more than a year. I'm based in Wrocław, so I came here from the city, from the Western Poland, about 40 kilometers from here, 400 kilometers from here. I'm a web technologies enthusiast and also Angular.love Meetup speaker, as you can see. And this is also not my first presentation, but first in English. And the last one, some private things about my private interest. It's like I am really hiking, sailing, and nature lover. So not only I spend my life not only in front of the computer screen, but also somewhere in nature, in mountains, wherever in the world. Okay, so the short agenda about what I'm gonna say today. First part is some general words about the content projection. What is it all about? What's the topics? What it really is? How it's implemented in Angular and also in other frameworks, libraries, in general in web APIs. Then the implementation in code. From the, as I said, the easiest part, like a single thread, to the more complicated through multi-slot to the dynamic content projection. And then we will try to make it a bit more professional, better. We'll do some improvements, so because there are still area for improvements to make our code better and faster, more professional looking. And the last part will be some curiosities about the content projection, and then I will present you some things that refer to the content projection, like the libraries or the another Angular parts, like Angular part that uses this topic and the similar concepts. Okay, so let's start. What is it all about? Let's imagine that your components is like a frame. Initially, this frame is empty. It's like a blank page, tabula rasa, And this is your component, and you are going to change the content that is within it, that are presented, for example, here on this blank page, on this white poster. So our component is exactly like a frame. We'll use it in many times, but in each place it will have a different content. And this content could be just a simple text, it could be image, it could be another component, it's another complicated things. Yeah. So for example, here we can just put inside our frame the Angular logo, but not only the Angular logo, because we can use our frames with many another logos, another frameworks or libraries. For example, like you can see here. But the content projection topic not comes only to these frameworks, libraries, but it's also present in the web API where it's named as slotting. So it's not something precisely correlated with only Angular, but it's something which is inside the web technologies for a long time. Okay, so now some examples from the library you probably use in your project, like the Angular material. It's a common UI library, and here I present you two common used components. Yeah, the first one is the card. The second one is tabs. The first one is much easier because we have the single card, and then we can pass content, table, etc. In this example, we have only a content in code with the simple card. And as you probably know, this content is displayed inside the card. And the second example, we have something more complicated because here we have tabs, and the content that is displayed under the tabs is different for each table. Yeah, for example, here you can see overview API and something else, but it's dynamically changing on user action when user do something, for example, click on the tab button. So today I'm going to do with you two content projection simple components. The first one will be something similar to this because it will be the expandable panel. It will be really simple. Here we have the example that you can know and you can recognize from the Angular material, but we are going to do something much simpler because only one card with the title on the top side and with the content which can be expanded or collapsed when user unclick the top part. Okay, so let's go to the implementation part. And here we have our initial project. The initial project uses the inputs when we pass the strings. So in the first code snippet, first code part, you can see the app expansion panel component uses with that which has the two inputs, the title and the content. The title is like Hello Warsaw, the content is Angular Meetup 9. It's really simple, you know how it works. It's just the text passed by the input. And the second part is the template of our component. It's just simple to lives inside another one. The first one is our header, our header, let's say let's name it header, and the second one is the content that can be expanded. So it's there. Then we can see the simple action, the toggle open function that can be called on the click by user, and it collapsed or open or expand or collapse the content part. Yeah, it's really simple and it works. Then we have the interpolation of the title and content properties which we got from the parent component. And on the bottom side of the slide, you can see how it looks. It's really simple. Yeah, it's in the expanded state. So yeah, as you can see, it's really simple, and the code is also really simple. You can try it on yourself how it was. Just click it or unclick using this QR code. It will be shown also in the next slides. Okay, so now we are going to change the implementation that I have shown you before into something that we call the content projection. So the first part of it will be we're doing something like single slot. So we will pass the only single data element data part. So like in the area between the two component tags, you probably know we have our component tags which commonly and very often are displayed and are written only like the opening tag and then nothing between them and then the close tag. And between them are the emptiness, so nothing. We don't use it, but we of course can use this space because this emptiness can be fulfilled with this data. And here is how we can use it to pass the content inside our app expansion panel. I just add the string, add this text in between the tags, and then I can get access to them just by using the ng content. And in every place in our component, in this example, that's expansion panels component, we can get access to this data, this text in this example, just by adding this ng content inside our template, our component template. So the data, this example, this text, Angular Meetup 9 is projected into our component. Yeah, so we can just use it in any place that we want, but we have still one input, one prop, like the title with the Hello Warsaw. But how we can do it to make it, how we can add more than only one slot, one data slot, one ng content, because we have one ng content. We don't have ng content 1, ng content 2, etc. So now we can do the multi-slot content projection. And how we can do it? Just by using ngContent and selectors. And what can be the selector? It can be like the attribute, it can be the CSS class selector, it can be something like the mix, also it can be component, etc. But these are three the more basic selectors that we can use. And then in our component, in our extendable panel component, we just adding the attribute select when we pass the selector for attribute components, and will be just the name of this attribute between the square brackets. For the CSS class selector, it will be just dot and then name of this class. And for something mixed, for example, here we have the button element, that action, which is class, and then save in square brackets, which is the attribute. So yeah, it's probably a concept that you already have known. Okay, so let's implement it into our applications, into our application. So, and again, we have this app expansion panels component, and between the tags, between open and closing tags, we have now two divs with two different attributes. The first attribute is the title, the second is the content, and inside them, I added the text that were previously passed inside the input to the input. So now we don't have any input. Our component has another attribute, nothing like directive. It's just the name in single tags. So then in the component we can use each of these elements just by using also ngContent, and then using the select attribute with the properly written attributes name. So here you can see it's title with the square bracket and the content in the square brackets. It's all in the lower window with code. And now also we can just check it with the QR code, and you can see that it works in the same way like before, but now we moved from the inputs and from two inputs to fully to content projection. Okay, so that's basically all with the basic part. And now let's go to something more advanced, like the dynamic content projection. And now in this part, we are going to make something like tabs, something similar as you can see in the Angular material library. So it will be something pretty simple. But let's start from what we are going to use in this part. Now, instead of ngContent, not only ngContent, we'll use something like ngContainer and ngTemplate. So what is it? ngContainer is like our frame. It's our frame, but ngTemplate is our content. So that's now we're just changing the naming, and ngContainer is it's basically this frame that we will fulfill, and which is initially empty, and which is then will be added template. And another very important part in here is the ngTemplate outlet directive that allow us to use the template that we will want to use, because it will be changed dynamically. Right? It will be changed dynamically, so this ngTemplate outlet will allow us to dynamically change and show the reference, the element that we are going to show under the selected tab. And another very important difference between the ngTemplate outlet and ngContent is that the ngTemplate outlet works more like lazy loading, but the ngContent is more eager loading. Okay, but what we are going to do in this part is like a simple tabs component. We have 3 buttons that allow us to change the tab. And then on the bottom, we will have the content, which corresponds to the tab. So the first one is the image, the second one is the description, and the third one is the sources. That encourage you to scan this QR code and just see the code and see how it works. Okay, so let's go somewhere further to the implementation. The first part is the ng template. So something in our parent component when we use this my tabs component. My tab is our component, our frame component, which will be fulfilled with different content. So it's our tabs with the button. And here we have 3 tabs and 3 buttons. Tabs each ng template has different content, and the content is corresponding with the tab. For example, the first one is the image, the second one is just some part of text with description, and the third one is the anchor to the source of the source of the image. And also we have the input that allow us to pass the array with the tab's name, so image, description, and sources. And also we have something new, so the directive my tab that allows us to get access to each of these templates. Okay, so how it looks in our component side. As I said before, we have new component, my tabs component, and it's pretty simple. Firstly, we have the property current panel that has store the reference to the template, to the content, to the ng template that I shown in the previous slide, with the content that we currently show, and also we have the index of the button that is currently clicked, and it allows us to find the proper template, but also this input with array of tabs name. And the most important part is this content children with the temp, where which allows us to get access to each of these templates. So this content children, when we pass them to this my tab directive, as I said before, this directive allows us, is like the mark directive, which allows us to read this ng template, and that's when we get the access to it, and that's when we store it on the component side, and then we can do with them what we want. We store in the structure which names is query list, and each of this list elements is another template. We had 3, so here we will have the 3 query list elements. Okay, and the last part is the set tab. It's the function that allows us to just change the tab on the click on any button, like image and description. It changes the current panel to the one we desired, and based on the index of the button we clicked. So yeah, basically the same. The implementation of this in the template, you can see. So the first thing is these 3 buttons. Each of them has their index 0, 1, and 2, and also we have these tabs, and they have just interpolated here the tab name, and we have 3 buttons with different name and with different IDs, and based on clicking on it, we call the set tab function that set the content. And then in the bottom part, we have the ng container tag used, and with this ng template outlet directive, which allows us to show the desired and the selected content from the current panel. So we pass the current panel into the directive, and basically everything works. Okay, so now our tabs are basically finished, and now I am going to show you some ideas that can help you improve your code in the future. Yep. So firstly, we are going to remove the tab names array. It's something that looks really ugly, and we don't want to do it previously because it could causes any bugs in the future, because we have to make sure that we have the same length of the names array as the amount of the ng template passed into the component, projected into the component. Yeah. So that's how we have it currently. And now we are going to split them between each of the ng template components. So each of them will get their name. So the first one will get name image, the second description, and the third sources. How I'm going to do it? Just by adding the input to our myTab directive. It can be simply implemented like this. So yeah, currently we don't have anything in the app myTabs tag, but in each of ng template we have another tab name with the text, with the name of the tab, which will be then presented inside the button. But what should we do to make it work? Firstly, we have to update the directive. We have to add this input, and that's basically all. The input is added, and now we can pass it just like on the top code part, like you see in that template. And also then we can get access to it using another content children. Now with these tabs, when inside the list we store these directives. Yeah, as you can see, it's query list with the generic type myTab directive, and every tab is this ng template tab and then we have the access to each of the element. So then we also have the access to its properties, like this input tab name, and then we also have the access to its name. So then inside our component template, we can have we just can make a for loop over these tabs from the content children, and we can get interpolated now not only tab name, but then tab name, which is element of each directive. Okay, and that's basically all from this side. So the first improvement we have added. So let's go further. Now I'm going to shorten the templates, because now we use the ng template directive, ng template component, but we are going to remove it. That's how it looks now, and that's how it will look after our changes. So now we don't have ng template with the directives, etc., and then inside it we have our content. Now we have our content with our directive, and and we just simply got rid of this ng template part, and it can be passed like this. And every tab name is passed to the directive name. So what another improvement we have to do inside the component to get this work? So firstly, inside our directive part, we have to add the constructor and to get access to this template. And then in the component, in our component base, myTabs component, we can get rid of the content children with these references to each ng template. Now we have only one with the reference to the tabs by the tabs directive, and because now from the tag directive we also have access to this reference to this content, to its name, etc., etc. So we got rid of the index, and then we update. And then we update the set table function just to set property of our directive tab template. Okay, and that works. And another improvement is context. And let's start from what is exactly context. The context is the data that we can get from the parent inside our component. For example, our generic component, our frame, has data that that we want to pass inside each of the component that we will use inside of them. So yeah, like you can see on this really simple diagram from the MyTabs component, I pass the data into the content that is projected, and then we can use it inside this. So how we can use it? It can be simply implemented by adding the second argument to the ng template outlet directive. It's the context one, and context one can access the object of data. Here you can see something really simple, just object with the one field message with the message, but you can do something more complicated and something more extended. And also it can be just added from the property in the component. But here we have something very simple, just the message, how are you, Warsaw, and that's all. And inside, and then in the parent, we can just use this context, this message that we passed from the component. Simply in our directive, the second part is the message as message, and this message can be displayed, interpolated wherever we want in our parent component. Yeah. Okay. So that's all. If it comes to the content projection, you can use this QR code to check the code and run it on your own and test it, change it. Is the code the blitz, the stack blitz, when you can find it and change it on your way. Okay, so let's go further to the last part. Some curiosities about the content projection, and the first thing is the portals. And yeah, and it's the concept that are built in the Angular, and it's a bit like content projection, but it allows us to get to send the data much further, not only from child to parents, but also to the much further adjacent. For example, the simple use case can be like you have the top bar, and this top bar depends on the data that we have currently on the page, but it's not directly connected. So we can use the portal, and the data for example in this top bar can be changed based on the content. We just change somewhere else in our app. Yeah, but this content is really it's much deeper. So I really encourage you to read something on your own. We have we have a great article about it on the Angular.love, so I encourage you to read it. Okay, and the second idea is the Polymorpheus library, and it's the library that allows us to pass the data from inside the component, but not only in the idea like the inputs, but only the text. It can be everything. It can be like a template component, primitives, primitives of course, and something the functions, and it's a really small library. So I really encourage you to read more about it and test it on your own. Yeah, and that's all. If you have any question, feel free to ask. Also, our online listeners also can just write the questions on the chat. Okay, please.
Yeah, so templates, ng templates are notorious for their lack of type checking when parameters are passed into context. Do you have any recommendations on how to make it better?
Do I have any recommendation to do it better? To be honest, no. I don't have anything in my mind right now. Yeah, so maybe let's discuss in the break, because yeah, currently I don't have anything to say about it.
I don't think it's possible.
Yeah. Okay, we have the question from the online audience. Can you show the QR code once again, or give us the link? Okay. So here's the QR code. Any other questions?
Have you tried like passing ng content to another ng content, like from the parent component to the child component? It's ng content, and was that working if you tried? Because I had a problem with this kind of situation.
Okay, we had a question about passing ng content into ng content. So just projected the projected element, yeah. Okay. I'm not sure if I accidentally tried something like this or did something like this, to be honest. Also, yeah, but yeah, I probably should try it because doing the thing like this, it's really interesting thing. Just passing the projected element into the project and projecting the projected element. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a problem with the content was not attached to the proper slot.
Mm-hmm.
Like projected, but into like this generic slot without selector, even when it was matching the selector. So yeah, but maybe that was some specific case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried and
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
in content projection you have these special attributes that you can specify what slot will match even if there is piercing from another projection. Like a nested projection, you have to use an attribute and you project as,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can pass to my kind of bubble.
Yeah, we have idea from here that we can just use ng project as. It's another feature that allow us to specify what type of the content we can use. But as probably the guy that asked the question tried it and they didn't fix it, and also the selectors that it doesn't work. So maybe it's the idea to try it and to investigate on our own. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention, and I'm giving the voice.
Okay, great topic, great talk, Konrad. Thank you also for questions. So yeah, right now I would like to also again encourage you, if you have any pictures from here, and you could also use tag Angular.love Meetup, hashtag Angular.love Meetup in social media. But right now I would like to invite you for a short 15 minutes break. And after the break, Maciej Wójcik from Cisco will tell you a bit more about ngOnInit and reactive components, why you shouldn't use it. I mean, ngOnInit there, not reactive components, of course. Okay, we see each other after short break. Okay, welcome after a short break, after speech of Konrad. And right now I would like to introduce Maciej Wójcik from Cisco. He will talk about ngOnInit, why you shouldn't use it in reactive components. So please welcome Maciej with an applause.
Thank you. So, hello everyone, good evening. I would love to share you with some thoughts on how to implement ngOnInit in your components, especially in your reactive components. So while it is still a common practice to initialize quite a lot of stuff in your components, to put quite a lot of business setup in your components in this particular lifecycle hook, I think we can take all the step back and actually rethink if we really need to do this. So as Angular continues to evolve, so should our approach to implement components. We should make the components more readable, more maintainable. The components should be smaller. The setup block should be smaller and far more readable. And maybe we don't need the ngOnInit after all. So my name is Maciej. I am a senior software engineer working with Cisco. I have over 6 years of developing Angular applications, and I'm an active member of the indev.dev community, where I'm writing articles, guides, tutorials, explaining Angular very, very deeply. You can find me on Twitter. I'm always happy to talk. So by all means, if you want to talk about Angular or any web development topics, feel free to ping me there. I'm always happy to talk. So let's talk about reducing ngOnInit in our components. But first of all, let's discuss this lifecycle hook, what it really is, and the differences between this and the constructor of the component class. And then we'll move into the reactive world. We'll talk about observables, about subscriptions, and how it all connects with the reducing of the ngOnInit in our components. And lastly, at the end, we'll have 3 very useful techniques that can help us reduce the ngOnInit in our components. But even though if you are a huge fan of ngOnInit and you love to stay with this lifecycle hook in your components, then still all those 3 techniques can be still very useful for you. So bear with me, there is something for everyone, I can assure you this. So the ngOnInit is a lifecycle hook provided by Angular, and this is the moment of time when Angular has initialized all data-bound properties. So it is a useful hook. It is a useful function that we can use in the components. I'm not saying it's not useful at all. I'm just saying that we tend to overuse it. We tend to fill it with too much of initialization. We are putting too much setup code within it. And basically, I don't think this is our fault. I think we just tend to do this because ngOnInit was enabled by default when we are generating components in Angular for so long. Up until version 15 of Angular, the ngOnInit block was part of the automatic generation of the component when we were generating it from the CLI. So it was very easy for us to just use this empty function. If we needed to initialize something, if we needed to do something on start of the component, and we already had an empty function block, then it is very easy to use it, to put some stuff in this. And while it is so easy, it also allows this function to grow. And it grows rapidly. And at some point of time, the components stop being readable at all. Maintainability of this component is really, really bad. Of course, there's nothing wrong with initialization per se, but we just shouldn't overuse it. And we tend to do that. So can we maybe put all this setup code instead of the ngOnInit into the constructor, and we could be happy. I would be happy. We could make this presentation much more shorter. So that's not so simple, not so easy. We need to realize what are the differences between the ngOnInit and the constructor. So the constructor is called like very, very early when Angular creates a tree of components, precisely speaking, the tree of views. So this happens very early, and as documentation says, it should be like a really light, really easy task to do. Like Angular should be able to create component instances like immediately without any issues. At the time when the constructor is called, at the time when the component instance is actually created, we'll have the access to all the things injected by the dependency injection mechanism. So for example, all your services, pipes, etc. But we won't have access to anything DOM related because the Angular didn't render anything at this time. Angular will render your template, will render your component during the first change detection. And at the time as the first change detection happens, it will also call the ngOnInit. So this is the time when majority of things will be initialized. You will have the access to your inputs, to your outputs, maybe to some DOM elements that you need to take some measurements of, like using viewchild or any other like query decorators. So because of that, it really looks like the ngOnInit is a good case for initializing stuff because we have majority of data that we may need for like some for like further processing, further initialization. So it seems like a good candidate, but still, I think we can do better, and we can combine those two approaches, especially in reactive components. So obviously, oh, I click on something, but yeah, so let's go to the reactive world of Angular, which is obviously like quite popular. Angular uses RxJS very, very heavily. It is like a required dependency of Angular. Many things in the core of the framework uses RxJS, uses observables under the hood. If we are calling some API using HTTP client module, we are using observables. If we are transmitting some internal events, like through event emitters on outputs, or maybe by some subject in the service, we are using observables under the hood. So like we are kind of like forced to use RxJS, to use observables, but that's really good. And ngOnInit is really convenient to use for subscribing to it, right? Because if we need to read the data from the observable, we need to subscribe for this observable in order to receive the data. And in the components, when we are fetching something and we want to present something for the user as soon as possible, then like what is the best way to do it? Like obviously we need to put this in the ngOnInit because as I said, it's already there. It is empty, it's ready to be used. So we tend to do that, and then we are simply persisting the thing we fetched, the thing we resolved from the observable, persisting in the component properties. And this is like a very common use case. I'm pretty sure like majority of you have written a code like that. But I want to show you why I think this is like a quite anti-pattern and why we should avoid doing that. Oh, again, wrong. Yeah, so this is the example of this pattern that I have described. We have a data property, then we have a service injected in the constructor, and then on init we are subscribing to the observable, and once the data is resolved, we are storing this in the component class property. Very, very common practice, very common use case. But if this is the only reason you are using ngOnInit, then it is completely unnecessary, and actually it has a lot of pitfalls, a lot of issues related to this particular approach. So let's go through those issues first. The first one is with the typing. So we need to realize that actually the type of the data property is not the myData. If we'll enable the strict typing here case configs, the compiler will throw an error because this property has no value at start. And most likely it will take some time to actually resolve it through the observable. Like if the observable is like a fetching task from the API, it can take even like a few seconds. in order to initialize this variable. So for all that time, it will not be defined. So it will be undefined, and we will need to acknowledge this in our typing system. Closer? Yeah, okay, awesome. So we need to acknowledge that in our typing system. We can do this in two ways. We can use the implicit typing, that's the type is my data, or undefined, or we can use the optional syntax. It really doesn't matter, but because after all, it will make the optional, the property optional, which is great. It will fix our compiler issue, but what's really bad about that is the intention. Look what we are presenting to other components, to other developers. If I will open the component written by someone else and I will see an optional property, I will have basically no idea what's going on, why this property is optional. Is there maybe some business case in which the component works in two different modes, maybe for creation and addition of some DTOs? And in one case, it can actually be undefined. In the second case, it needs to be defined. And if I need to maintain the component, if I need to change something in it, I will need to understand what's the case. Do I need to supply the value, or maybe I simply don't? Or maybe this is just saying that this property is optional because we are subscribing and we need to wait for this moment of time when the value will be fetched for us. So the intention is really, really bad. It's hard to predict what's really going on. And then even the worst thing can happen. So we can forget to unsubscribe. Every time we subscribe in our components, we really need to unsubscribe, because if we do not do that, it will cause some serious performance issues in your application. And what is really bad about that is on your local environments, when you are developing your applications, you probably won't see the problem. Everything will work fine because you're refreshing the app constantly. But then you deploy on production, actually client will use it, and it will break after some minutes of using the application. And the scary thing is there will be no indication what component caused this issue. There won't be any stack trace, any error thrown in the console. You will have no idea why the app is broken. So actually tracing this issue and fixing it can be really problematic. And of course, if there is something that you need to do in every situation, in every case, at some point you will forget. We are only humans, right? We can't forget something in a stressful situation or in a press of time. So I can guarantee at some point we will forget to unsubscribe, and it will cause some serious problems. Also, what's really bad is that the component code just doubled in size. And while the lines of code are not the most important metric, as we all know, the mental model is. And right now, I am not able to tell at first glance what's really going on. I will need to properly analyze this component in order to get what is the responsibility, what is the function of this component. There are two properties, there are two functions, there are some nesting going on. I have no idea that the responsibility of this component is simply to fetch a single property. Look how many code we need to do in order to fetch a single property. This is really crazy. A small hope is coming in Angular 16. This is a new operator. It is called take until destroy. It, in many cases, can actually fetch automatically the reference to the on destroy of the component, and it can automatically destroy unsubscribe for your subscription in your component. But still, you need to remember about putting this operator in every subscription in your components. So still, there's a chance that you will forget about that. And then there's a huge problem with uncertainty. We have no idea when the value will be available in our component. Observable is just a way of delivering the value. It's just a stream of data. There is no guarantee when the data will be available. Like there isn't even a guarantee that the value will be available at any time. There could be an error thrown or on API, and in this case, we won't have access to our value for the whole life of the component. And this is also a very problematic issue because it can result in different behaviors on different environments, on your local machines, on your local setup with maybe some mocks instead of the backend. Everything will work smoothly. Even this silly example can work on mocks. But then once we deploy on production, there will be some timing between front end and back end. And this thing, for sure, it will throw an error that you're accessing something from undefined. I hope it is very clear. And this is a simple example, and still I have seen this many times in the code reviews. But we can go even further. Let's imagine this last line of code is put it not on the ngOnInit, very next to the subscription block, but it is actually called in some functional click. Then are we sure that the user clicks on this button after the data is loaded? How can we be sure? Maybe we can put some ngIf or some if statement to make sure that happens. But still, we are adding boilerplate to our component, which is not really needed from business logic perspective. The data processing is not the worst thing that could happen in the subscription block, but still, it is not great because the business logic tends to grow. We are adding more things into our ngOnInit. We may even need to call a few APIs, a few endpoints to get some data. So we will end up in a few subscriptions in the ngOnInit, and each subscription will be quite long. So the whole initializing step of the component can be really hard to understand, can be really hard to fit into the mental model of this particular component. And also what's really bad about that is there's no control mechanism in TypeScript or Angular to ensure that only a subscription block can mutate, can assign this value. We are not sure that there is some other function called onClick on maybe some other subscription that can affect this value, that can mutate it. That could happen. That could happen. So if we really need to analyze what's going on, we'll need to read carefully through all lines of this component. And this is not great if we need to maintain it, if we need to simply add some silly, small feature into it. This is really bad, and the mental model grows. And lastly, there is some nesting. So quite often we need to subscribe for something, and then once we get the data, we are subscribing even more for something else based on the data from the previous subscription, and can go on and can go on. We can have multiple levels of nesting. And now, understanding when the value will be actually to be used, when it will be resolved, it is very, very hard. Even remembering what the things that needs to happen before, what they are, fitting this into our mental model of the component is really, really hard. So of course, this example is rather simple. We have only 2 subscriptions, but it is a quite often situation that we have 5 or 6 levels of nesting, and the whole thing becomes really, really unreadable. So what I think about all of this is, instead of taking the full advantage of the observables, of the whole beauty of the reactive world that we have in Angular, we are staying in this comfort zone of subscribing as soon as possible for our values. And when we are storing the values as the component properties, we are feeling kind of safe. As we have the values, we store them, and now we are kind of feeling safe that we can operate on them, we can use them in the templates, we can do basically whatever we want, because we avoided this problem of having asynchronous data. But we really didn't. I have showed you all those issues related to subscription for something. It's really unpredictable, and we are making a lot of mistakes when combining this asynchronous and synchronous code in our component. What I would like to present is like a design of treating components more like a functions to render something. Like this should be the purpose of the component, to render something for the user on the screen. Instead, we are very frequently treating components as a kind of databases, like a front-end instances of the databases. We are storing quite a lot of things in the component, which is not really for that. Like the component should be really for rendering stuff. And that's the only thing that should happen. So as you can tell, this design is like quite important for me as a concept, but it also resolves all sources of the issues that I have presented before. So this is basically the approach. Instead of subscribing multiple times in our ngOnInit, we can simply define the observable properties in the component, like simply as that. And then we can use these observable properties in the template. There's no need for subscribing for it. There's no need for storing the values. Like there's no need even for like storing it twice. We can have like a single source of truth, which will be our service or our observable. The component doesn't really need to store it twice. We can use it with async pipe. And the async pipe is something built in Angular, so you don't need any external library or something. It is pretty efficient. So you can actually resolve any asynchronous values like observables or promises using the async pipe. And then in the template, you always have the last emitted value from those asynchronous source of data. So this is really simple. And now we'll go through all those issues and check if they still exist or maybe not. So first of all, the typing. As you can see, we are declaring the observable property like on start on the component creation. So there is no way that this observable, this reference to observable, will not have a value. It has a value from the very start, from the very construction of the component class. Not even that, we can add the read-only keyword because we don't want anyone to mutate it, to change this property. Like it is a complete set of data ready to be used. And this is really good in case of the intention that we are leaving for other developers. Like we are clearly saying that this property is complete, is ready to be used. You probably don't need to do anything with this property, just simply use it in the template. Next, there is no problem with the unsubscription, with unsubscribing from the subscription, because async pipe does all those things for us. We don't need to put any boilerplate into our component classes. And this is really great because we don't need to remember about that. But also our component code stays 100% focused on the actual business logic. There is no need for adding something to avoid memory leaks, to avoid some problems. Everything that we are doing in the component is really the responsibility, is really the purpose of this particular class. And it was really clean and readable approach. And then we were talking about this uncertainty regarding when the value will come, when we'll have access to it in order to maybe process it or maybe take some fragment of the response. So we need to start thinking reactively. Like observables are the most powerful when we are treating them as a streams of data and not resolving as soon as possible. Like if we are treating observables like a streams of data, we can do whatever we want with those streams. We can combine them, we can process the values, we can maybe even like apply some rules over those streams to adjust them to our needs, to the purpose of the component. And applying those rules on the reactive streams, it is really easy. Like we have a pipe, which is like a wrapper for all pipeable operators. And each pipeable operator can somehow transform our stream of data. We can apply any data processing that we would normally do, but in a way of applying the rules on the stream. we are not modifying the values. We don't really care when or if the value will arrive. We are simply saying that when the value will arrive, just please apply those rules. Please do this processing. It is simply about defining some rules and not actually making them on the actually resolved values. And by that, we are ensuring that every time the result from the observable will be up to date, will be fresh, and we don't need to like store it or like restore it every time that something changes. And yeah, so with the data processing, it is really like pretty much the same. We can still apply in the same operator. So we can use the map operator, which is a pipeable operator that simply transforms the values that comes through the observable. And what is really great is I have told you that before there was no mechanism, no controlling mechanism that someone else is not modifying our value. In the map operator, in the observables, we are sure that only the things within the pipe wrapper can actually affect the values. Like there's no way that like some other function or like even some other component can affect this observable. It is like complete within this pipe operator, within this pipe wrapper with all those pipeable operators within it. So if we need to understand why this particular observable has some bugs, like maybe something is missing, we only need to read through this single pipe wrapper, which is really, really good. And the pipeable operators can also help us with nesting. So with nesting, we need to think about that more like mapping observable into observable, maybe into another observable. So in this process, we can create like an observables of observables of observables. And this is actually like quite hard to resolve, like because we are generating a lot of observables, which we would need to subscribe for it. So that's why we have the flattening operators, which like in a single run, they map and they flatten the structure of the observables. So we don't have the observable of observables. We'll always have a single observable with only like a plain value. So these flattening operators are, for example, the switch map, the merge map, concat map, exhaust map. They all differ in a way of handling the value when the new value arrives, but basically they all do pretty much the same thing. Depends on your use case. You may need to use different one. In here, I'm using the switch map because I only care about lastly emitted ID. So yeah, all those things hopefully looks all right to you, but then you might start wondering if this is really all right that I am putting so much like potentially heavy computations inside those observables defined at start. Like previously, I've said that the construction time, the constructor should be very light. There should not be like much processing inside of it. So is it really all right to put all those things in the pipeable operators? And for that, I think I think we need to realize what is the difference between the promise and the observable. So unlike promises, observables won't be called until they are subscribed. And this is really important for this particular concept, because as you see, we are subscribing with the async pipe. And the async pipe is prepared for us in the template. And as I said, the template won't be rendered at the construction. It will be rendered during the first change detection. So at the time when the ngOnInit is called. So in the same time that the ngOnInit is called, our async pipe will arrive, it will subscribe, and it will actually run the whole observable. So all those potentially heavy computations that we have in the map operators or some other operators within the pipe wrapper, all those things will run basically at the time of the ngOnInit. So all those things that I have prepared for you, they're basically like a reactive version of the ngOnInit. They will happen in the time of ngOnInit, but they don't really need to implement ngOnInit at all and store any properties. And now let's take a look at 3 techniques that can help you limit number of observables, that can help you reduce the ngOnInit even more. So this particular one, it is called the view model, and it is really the technique to limit number of observables, limit number of subscriptions in your components. So even if we are using all like appropriate operators, we are doing everything that I have presented to you, we still can end up in a situation that we have a lot of observables or maybe a lot of async pipe in the template. Like we may even need to like resolve the same observable multiple times in the template because we need the data in a few DOM elements. So for that, we are putting like quite a lot async pipe in the template, which cannot be like ideal situation because each async pipe will trigger change detection on emit from the observable. So if we'll end up with like quite a lot async pipes in our template, it can cause some performance issues. So we need to tackle that. And there are some libraries that tackles that problem, for example, by implementing their own versions of the of the async pipe. And like that's all good, you can use it. But still, I would like to show you like a technique to limit the number of async pipes in your template without really a need for any external library whatsoever. And yeah, for that, we can use the view model approach, which is like an approach to create like a complete set of data that will be used for render in the component. And this is really intuitive for me because if the purpose of the component is to render something for the user, then like what's like the better way than putting all those things that will need to be rendered inside a single block, inside a single object. Obviously, with like a regular components, it is so much easier to wrap all those properties inside a single property, inside a single object. With our reactive components, we need to do something more because we have observables. We can't simply combine them. We need to create another observable that is created based on those like source observables. And for that, we can use the combine latest operator, which basically creates a single observable that on every emit will have an object, and this object will have 2 properties that will have always the lastly emitted values from those sources observables. So that's the approach, and as you can see, it is like fairly easy to use it in the template. So Konrad was saying like how can we use the ng container for content projection. In here we can use the ng container as a fake DOM element that won't be added to the DOM at the runtime, but we can use it to like help us structure our template. So we can use it to put the ngIf, we can use to resolve the view model with a single async pipe, no matter how many observables like initially we had. Now we have a single async pipe. We're resolving this whole observable only one, and then we can use it as this component, as this template property VM everywhere in our template. It is really readable. It is really easy when I need to maintain a component and something is not right in the template. I know what the property of the component I will need to look for because there's only a single one. And there is a second great thing about this approach. Is basically sometimes you may feel that this view model concept in your component doesn't really fit. Maybe you feel like the data semantically doesn't fit, or maybe the timing is not right because like one property is resolved very like soon, and then the second one may be on some user interaction, and you may feel that the view model is not for you. But this can actually mean that the component has too much responsibility, and maybe it doesn't fit semantically in the component. And maybe it even makes more sense to split the components into multiple ones, and then the view model can be applied without any issues. The second technique is the selectors. And this is a very powerful feature from the ngRex, which is a state management library. Of course, I won't talk about the state management here. It could be like another topic for another meetup. But basically, it is a very powerful feature which we can use to simplify our components even more. So if we are using the state management from ngRex and we want to read something from the state, we are using selectors, which are like a pure functions, really, really simple, that read something from the state. We can create selectors using other selectors, like combine them together, which is actually really great in case of the performance. And we can outsource everything that we had in those pipeable operators back into the selectors, which is really great because when we are outsourcing the logic from the component, we are making component like smaller, easier to understand. And in the other hand, the business logic is easier to reuse and it is easier to test because we only need to test like a simple, pure function. And in the component, it is really easy to use the selectors. We are simply having a single observable property that reads something from the state. And the component code is really, really simple. No need for ngOnInit, really readable solution. And the last thing is the component store. It is a very small, very tiny package, also from ngRex, but you don't need to use ngRex as your state management library. You don't need to have the state management at all. You still can use the component store. I really encourage to do so. It creates like another layer for the component to provide a data. And this really combines everything that we have learned today so far. So the component store can expose a single view model instance, which will be like an observable, ready and complete for use in the component, which we'll, of course, use in the template, resolving it using the async pipe. And the component store can prepare this view model using selectors, using other observables, using local state. It can still use all pipeable operators that we have learned today. So basically, it combines everything. It exposes a single instance of the view model to the component. And the component really stays within this single responsibility of rendering things and not having to initialize some setup code, which is not really needed. So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. My final thought is to start treating components as a functions to render data, as a functions to project something for the user, and not treating components as a databases and storing everything in their classes. So that's all. And now I think it's a great moment for questions.
So you said at the beginning that ngOnInit is all about the state of the application where all the data is already bound. While view model looks like a good solution in multiple cases, what if the data being downloaded depends on at least one views?
Yeah, so if the data okay, so the question basically is we need to download something that depends on the inputs of the component. Okay, then still this approach works because as I said, when we are creating the observable and we are defining them as a component properties, they won't be run, they won't be subscribed until they are until the template is rendered. So we'll have access to all inputs, outputs, and we can create the observable, we can initiate the observable based on the input value. Okay, so there is a question about how was what was that? Okay, how is error handling done? So basically, you can deal with the error handlings like however you want. You can catch error and display something else in the template. You may use the materialize operator to basically combine all three streams in the observable into a single stream. Basically, once we have the observable, we can do whatever we want, especially error handling. Okay, no more questions from the chat. Okay, then I think we are good. Thank you.
Thank you, Maciej, for a great talk. I saw not only applause here, but also from online community. There was a lot of, how to say, that's kind of applause there, and greetings for your talk. So yeah, I mean, thank you guys for being part of that great event. I just want to hold you for a few more seconds just to display you a QR code with the survey. You can, the people that are on site here have a QR code on the table. So I just want to ask for your opinion about the event, about the content, about speakers, and so on, so we can do it even better next time for you. And also for people on site, there will be a Kahoot questions. I mean the competition here, so you can win some prizes, some swag by being here, but it's only for the on-site people for now. And then I invite you for a beer and a pizza in the backstage and just to have a chat and then networking. So yeah, so thank you for your online presence. So I will say goodbye for the online audience and hopefully see you next time. And we're looking forward for having feedback from you. Yeah, and so thank you, online guys. That's it, I think.